Welcome to the Law, Your Money, and You. I'm Roberta Saphire, an attorney in Sharon, Massachusetts.
And I'm Camille Barron, a health insurance advisor also in Sharon, Massachusetts. And today we're going to be touching on a topic that is more and more rampant in the world. People are aging, and there's a lot of things that people have to know as they get to that point.
They're living longer, but they're easy marks. Anyway, we are so blessed, however you want to say it, to have with us attorney Tracy Wilson. I understand you're from Quincy, which is a big city.
That's
but
correct.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, and thank you for visiting us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. My name is Tracy Wilson. I'm from Quincy, born and raised. I am married, 2 children who are teenagers. I have a law practice. I've been a lawyer for about 20 years.
Oh, you look like a baby. Do you have any
thank you.
dogs or cats or birds?
Cats.
Yeah.
2
Oh,
brothers.
man. Brothers.
And what kind of law do you practice, Tracy?
Yes.
So it's a general practice, mostly a lot of probate law with estates, probate and estates. We do a lot of family law, which includes also mediation for estates as well, if there's a will contest.
Is that no mediation for estates? I think you mentioned you'd had this 20, 50-hour course just on that.
That's a mediation training. It was a family law mediation training course. That was about 30 hours, I believe.
Wow.
But yes, mediation for estates. I've actually been involved in several will contests, and several of them we mediated, and there were cases with family feuds over, dad's will, and it's amazing how much a mediation can help. So I would be the attorney, and we'd have a mediator.
That's because there's money, but if there's no
That's 'cause
money, there's
there's
no
money.
mediation, there's nothing, no arguments.
Right. And
Isn't that interesting?
money can be the root of all evil sometimes in these
Yeah.
cases, as we know.
Mm.
Every family thinks it can't happen to them, but
So when they mediate, do they have to sign something in advance? That
yes. Yep. And it can be confidential. It will be confidential, so you can't go to court and say, this is what Paul said in mediation. Everything will be confidential.
But before that, you were going to talk about elder I can't even say the word.
So we were going to talk. I know when we talked, I was an assistant district attorney
Oh,
many years ago in Norfolk County under Bill Keaton.
he's now congressman.
He's now a congressman. And I worked there for about 2.5 years, and I was fortunate enough I worked in the district court prosecuting here every day, like assault and battery cases, drunk driving
boy.
cases, but I was also fortunate enough to be in charge of this unit that was fairly new, which is elder abuse, because elder abuse, as we know, it keeps growing and growing now with the
Yeah.
baby boom population. So with that unit, we would deal with different protective service agencies. Like I think the one in Sharon is HESCO.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. Yeah, they do a lot of good
They
work.
do a lot. They
Yeah.
do. They're great. We would work with HESCO or South Shore Elder Services, where if they thought there was an issue of abuse or some type of even financial abuse, is many categories, by the way, they would refer to the DA's office to see if it's something we could prosecute. And then we would help with outreach, but
Well, can you prosecute for financial abuse?
yes.
Really?
So in Massachusetts, an elderly person is considered 60 or over. Some people don't like to hear that, but as far as the law goes, in Massachusetts, there's heightened penalties for crimes against somebody who's 60 or over, and there takes the form of many different types of abuse. The first thing that comes to mind is physical abuse.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone hits their parent, or even if it's a caretaker.
Have you ever, I got a question though, have you ever prosecuted members of a bank for trying to get loans or accounts from people and they really didn't want to, but in other words, they were only supposed to charge so much, and then Because I think we had problems with banks a few years ago. Have you ever
I
done
never
that?
did. That might have been something that maybe the white collar crime unit would have done.
Oh.
But back in my day, I didn't.
Let me ask you a question on the physical abuse. Let's say you're a family member or you're a patient in a nursing facility, assisted living, maybe in the memory care unit of an assisted living where you don't have all of your mental faculties. How can one protect themselves or their family member against that type of abuse that may possibly occur in that facility?
That's a very good question, because a lot of times the family members, if their parent or grandparent or aunt and uncle are in a facility, they're not there 24/7.
Right.
So how do you protect that? And the nursing homes, they have the Department of Public Health oversees the nursing homes and the long-term care facilities. So there's reporting requirements and mechanisms, but I mean,
they
can
just
you see something
alarm it.
24/7?
Yeah, they dump them off and they figure they're fine. You know, it's depressing to hang. But one of my in-laws, which this happened, he hired somebody, an outsider, to go there a few days a week to be with his wife, to make sure she got to the bathroom, to make sure, you know, and he would, this is what some people do, very few, but he sold his house and moved across the street in an apartment so
Okay.
that he could go over at any time to check them. And that way the woman got wonderful care, as opposed to other people I know who just nothing. And then when you go see the patient there, you can see the difference, you know, when you and
It's
people,
very
how do
difficult.
people deteriorate.
And
so isn't that what
that's
somebody like you would do,
Well,
a
our
patient
company
advocate?
patient advocates would be able to do that, oversee and check and all of those things. But if somebody doesn't have, say, the financial means to pay a patient advocate, or maybe there isn't anyone nearby, I've heard of things like putting a camera, hiding a camera in the room.
Oh,
Is
what a
that
good
legal?
idea.
Is that legal?
Oh, that's a good guide.
Oh, that's good.
Never come
I
across
like
that
I
one.
think I
I'm
saw it
not-
on a TV show.
Yeah, but
If it's a private
oh, you
facility, I mean,
Yeah,
I
but
don't know
you know,
why it
that
wouldn't
is
be
good.
if it's a private facility, and you probably would sign a contract saying that there's cameras. I mean, there's cameras everywhere now. So.
Right.
Yeah, isn't
But
that true?
an interesting fact, I did work
have
at a
cameras
nursing
here.
home. I worked at a nursing home for a few years while I was in law school. So I did get to.
What did you do?
I worked in administration and handled some labor management relations as well. It was in Mission
that's
Hill.
Interesting. Oh, Mission Hill.
Mission Hill. It was great. It was
Wow.
great.
You were
but
brave.
but there were a lot of situations where we had definitely some incidents of suspected physical abuse by a staff member. But sometimes the cases were very, you know, the elder would have no family and they maybe wouldn't want to speak up, or maybe they didn't have the capacity at the time to relay what
So
happened.
sad.
So, and then you're dealing with, you know, grievance processes and everything else. So it
That's
it
so
was hard.
sad.
But and with the nursing home too, the other issue is restraints too. So if you're over medicating, or if you're restraining somebody to have too many physical restraints against them, I mean, that could be considered.
So you must have had some
abuse.
very interesting cases.
Always interesting cases, right?
But I mean, is there anything that any source of support available to someone? It seems a little bit discouraging that somebody who is alone and doesn't have much family
Right.
nearby might have to tolerate those things.
Right. So there are the social workers that work in the facility, and they have the ombudsman you can call, and they'll go in and investigate. But, I mean, I guess if there's certain signs you would see on an elder, if maybe a nurse or a doctor or a visitor, you know, bed sores or the malnutrition,
Boy.
dehydration.
Well, you, with all those cases that you dealt with, it wasn't just nursing homes. Was it at their home too, like cases of people in their houses?
Yes. So I did pull a statistic, and almost 60% of abuse and neglect incidents of elders are family members. But what else is very interesting is the issue is the reporting. Many family members, especially elders, do not report abuse, whether it's physical or financial, because of different reasons. They don't want to get their family member in trouble. They're ashamed, they're embarrassed.
They don't know they
or
can report it.
they don't know any better. So another statistic I pulled is that approximately 1 in 10 age 60 and over have experienced, this is what's reported, some form of elder abuse. That's only 1 in 10 is only what is reported, and a study estimates only 1 in 14 cases are reported.
Really?
So that's just
Wow.
such a small number. And then with the population today, I have a graph that I pulled. America's growing elderly population because of the baby boomers. By the year 2050, there's going to be about 22 million over 65 and older of the population, where today there's a little over 12 million. So
It's going to more than
it's
double.
going to double.
Wow.
That's just an
Where
estimate.
are they all going to live?
Right? I know. And a lot of those, they're going to be 85 and above too, because more people are living longer. So the
that's
stats are going to
fascinating.
increase quite a bit of the population aged 85 and over.
You know, it's like people that have 25th wedding anniversaries, it's like nothing today, because
It's
there's so
nothing
many now that have 50 years and over, where 30, 40 years ago, people were lucky to go 25 years.
So
Right.
my parents will have 50 next year.
Really?
Yes.
Isn't that nice?
Isn't that exciting?
Yeah.
Yes.
But you know, the men, they say we have a "you got to be kidding," which I'll say now. You know, men die before their wives. You know why?
Because
They want to.
they're-
She laughs. She laughs. Cute. What a cute laugh. You can come here anytime. So the next case you try, or while you're sitting there with the mediation, are a very serious thing. I want you to think of that.
So what are some of the other forms of
Go
abuse?
ahead.
Maybe things that people are not familiar with because they may not be as obvious as the physical forms.
So there's a growing number of the financial exploitation, and that's in the Massachusetts law
And how do
as
they-
well.
how
and
do
that's
they
also
do that?
considered abuse. So that's the illegal or improper use of somebody age 60 and over, their money, their assets, their funds.
So it has
if
to be age 60 or over, because
age
what
60 and over
what if-
has a specific.
What if
well,
it's younger and they?
Well, it would be some type of larceny, or you can get them on something
Oh,
else. But there's
yeah.
there's heightened penalties for
Oh.
elders. So that would be, son. Say mom's alive. She's 85 and she has 10 kids, and now one out of the 10 lives with mom. That's it, and this is the son that
Somehow
never
they
really
get-
worked, and
Yeah.
took money from mom in the past, might have
Yeah.
a substance abuse issue.
There's a lot of those around. There's
Yeah.
a lot of those. But the thing is, the person lives in the house. He's probably taking care of the mother and feels he's entitled to it.
That's
the problem.
excellent point, and that comes up quite a bit. So then the question is, are they really taking care of their
Oh yeah.
parent or not? Are they nourished? Are they
Oh,
giving them the necessities that they need? And that can go along with the neglect or the physical abuse as well. So
Boy,
it
isn't
can
that
come in all different
terrible.
stages.
My mother used to say, one mother can take care of 100 kids, but 100 kids can't take care of one mother.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
So do you have any examples that you might share with us about the financial abuse?
So financial abuse could be, typical example would be, say mom's in a nursing home and one of the kids goes by herself to say mom has 5 kids, but one of them decides, I'm going to go in and have mom sign some paperwork. And then mom thinks she's signing something for the nursing home, and she's changing the beneficiary on her life insurance policy.
Or making joint bank accounts.
That happens quite a bit.
I did some volunteer work at the Norfolk Probate Court, you know, the wills and all
Yes.
that. And there invariably somebody's coming in that the brother or sister, the father put the house in both their names, and then afterwards, the money, and then afterwards when they passed, they were supposed to share it with the others, but the one who got it thinks that now it's
Right.
his. What-
So I definitely have come across that. That's pretty common.
Now, if they did that, they were over 60, would this law come into effect?
Well, not if they're deceased.
Oh, but what if
So then-
what if the siblings were over 60? Oh, that wouldn't do it.
That wouldn't do it, but it would end up being some type of will contest, and you'd have to file
Oh.
a civil complaint in either the probate court or the superior court.
Would that be a good case for mediation, like a state mediation?
It could be, absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about your mediation cases
So,
that you can share, if you can.
for the estates. So we've
Yeah.
had mediation. I've had mediation cases where, kind of an example like you just pointed out. You know, father leaves a will. Father has a will, or leaves the house with him and 2 other children, meaning for it to go to all the children, but for whatever reason, just for convenience purposes, just puts it in a couple of names. And then last minute, before our father goes into the hospital a week before, he's changing the deed or changing his will and deeding it to just one of those, one family member that was never on there before. Things like that happen.
I think the parents think that they're making it easier, you know, and avoiding probate, but they're really not, are they? They're making it.
They're not. And I actually
No.
had one case where the mom was, I won't get into the facts of this one, but I actually had one case where the mother who wrote her will was a lawyer. And it was a will contest for about 3 years.
Really? And she wrote it?
And she wrote it,
Did she
right?
sign it? Did I?
She signed it.
Well, it seems like it'd be difficult
Isn't that
after
something?
the death to prove one way or the other whether it was if it was deceptive or not. So, like in
Right.
that case you gave, if the parent died and the will or whatever the document was changed to that one other sibling, is it possible to prove that she was doing it under duress or she wasn't
Right.
aware that it was going on?
Yeah.
Or that she wasn't competent. It's very difficult to prove.
Yeah.
Very difficult to prove, because when you're signing a will, you know, the competency is at the time of signing.
Mm.
And you
Yeah.
usually have in Massachusetts a
The two
self-prove will.
witnesses.
You can have 2 witnesses
Yeah.
and a notary. So in most cases they do have that. So how do you prove that mom really didn't know, or dad really didn't know what he or she was doing?
And the witnesses may not remember.
And the
either.
witnesses, they're just witnessing that
They
you're
probably
signing
need help
it. It's your own
themselves.
free act and deed. So it is very difficult to prove. So because one, there's a death, so you know they're not here to testify. So you'd have to get different family members to testify about their state, and you'd have to get medical records or an expert opinion possibly about from how they died from compared to when they signed the will. It depends on the proximity and time. So between expert opinions, family members, and then there's also, you know, if it's an undue influence case, you have to prove that it's an unnatural disposition. What does that really mean?
Yeah,
So,
what does that mean?
so if you're, it's not, case law can be a little unpredictable sometimes, but if you're going to distribute to, say, a family friend rather than your family, that would be unnatural. But if I give to my daughter Sally, but not my daughter Mary, they're both my children, so it's not really an unnatural disposition.
No, not today. What about some of these financial exploitations? It says bank employees.
Bank employees.
Yeah, have you had any of those?
I haven't, but I know that the banks, I mean, they do pretty good background checks on their employees. I know that. So. So,
Well,
I
it
mean,
sounds
if you
like
have a
that-
criminal record of larcenies, you shouldn't be working at a
Yeah.
bank.
Right.
But if anyone, especially with loan officers, I think they have even heightened
Oh, really?
regulations. But so, I guess everywhere you're susceptible because nowadays with identity fraud, you know, if your
Oh,
social
yeah.
security number, or even people who after they pass away, sometimes you hear
Oh, yeah, they
cases
vote.
where they
vote, the ones
use
that
their
pass away.
socials and they're
Yeah.
not even alive.
You-
Or
you
family
know-
members do that too.
Oh, they vote? Oh,
Or they'll for the day they vote and they take the money.
Yeah,
They might have
yeah,
a
they
family
say that-
member and they'll still collect checks and not
Oh, I know
notify,
a lot
not
of that.
notify.
You know, there's some, and I don't know if this is exploitation of them or of the state, where they have this new thing, or I don't know if it's new, where if you're sick, instead of hiring an outside caretaker, you can name somebody in your house to be your caretaker, and the state pays for them. And they do that in
Right.
Rhode Island too. And then the
Right.
person dies, but the caretaker still gets all the checks.
Right.
Are
Right.
they get checks for babysitting, childcare? I think childcare.
Childcare.
Yeah. And then the childcare, the children are no longer there, and they still collect. Have you had that?
I
Have you
haven't
had-
had it, but I've heard of it. It definitely happens.
Yeah, and we as taxpayers are paying for all of that.
Right.
Massachusetts.
And the cases that come up a lot, and I'm looking here at the information on the financial exploitation, but it could be any of it, the thing that they have in common, these cases, I think, is that it's a trusted person, somebody who's
always
trusted
a
by the
person.
family or
Right.
the patient or the elder person.
Well, aren't
Someone
it-
who's trusted, and
Yeah.
that's how they can get inside the circle, so to speak, and be able to do some of these things.
Like attorneys are limited, like you can't get the money in, like you can't make out a will and have money left to you.
Right. Right. That's a conflict.
Yeah, that's a big
Right.
conflict there.
I wouldn't do that.
No, but I
But
know
yeah.
I know an attorney who the person insisted they wanted to, you know, he was like a son. He says, "Well, I'll go to this other attorney, let them make out your will. I can't do
You
that."
can't do that.
And
Right.
she something still happened. He did, I think, a different attorney there, and she signed all this thing, and they still gave him disciplinary action.
Right.
It wasn't even that much money. But
It's not worth
really,
it.
Yeah,
That's-
no, it's not worth it.
no.
You really have to be careful in how you practice.
Right.
And now, when you do mediation, and then before we go, I want to see if there's anything in this topic of exploitation that we haven't talked. But when you do mediation, have you ever been accused of that you can't you're trying to represent both of them, and you're not supposed to do that? You're only supposed to have one client.
No, you have to. You definitely would have a conflict check first, and you wouldn't be representing. You're not representing either person as a lawyer. You're just you're just mediating to try to get them to come to an agreement.
Do you
You're
tell
not
them that in
providing
the
legal
beginning?
advice. They have to
Yeah.
know all this up front. So if one of the parties came in as a client, and I was dealing with them as a client and giving them legal advice, I wouldn't be able to do a mediation because that would just conflict it out.
What if they were both your clients? You represented them somewhere.
No, I wouldn't.
You should,
we
we're into you've got to
we
be
do
kidding.
conflict
You should
checks.
say you've got to be kidding.
You've got to be kidding.
Here's my you've got to be kidding bag, which is yeah. But no, is there one more thing we have
There-
time for?
One thing before coming onto the show, there was a recent Globe article, and it talked about there was a surge in reports of suspected elder abuse due to the opioid crisis, which, if you think about it, makes a lot of sense because a lot of adult children who are addicted to heroin or other substances, they'll move in with their parents or their grandparents or their aunts and their uncles, and they'll
Oh, they
clean them
take-
out.
Oh, of
clean them out.
their drugs.
It's just so they can go buy drugs.
They steal.
Oh,
so
they
can-
take the money. I
They'll
thought
take their
maybe they
money.
take their
They'll take their
drugs.
jewelry.
Oh,
They'll
isn't that terrible? You're not
Right.
kidding either.
that. And then there was one other thing too. Mickey Rooney.
Oh yeah.
Mickey Rooney. Did you know about him and the financial
No.
No.
abuse he suffered?
No.
Oh, he suffered
He suffered.
from
and
that wife he married.
He was.
from
It
her?
was his son-in-law and his son-in-law's wife. and
His
he
son-in-law
testified.
and his son-in-law's wife.
Yeah. So he testified before Congress after suffering for years to emotional and financial abuse because his stepson and his stepson's wife managed his money, and they stole his money, kept him in the dark about finances, threatened him. They refused him basic necessities such as food, medicine.
Oh, that's horrible.
And he suffered silently. If he would say something, they'd tell him to shut up. You don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, my goodness.
And then,
Horrible.
so he was probably in fear and ashamed and didn't know what to do, but he finally spoke out, and it brought a lot of light too.
Wow. You've got to be kidding.
Oh, you really have to be kidding. Oh my God, you're so full of information.
Yeah.
And how do you stay so delightful being exposed to all that?
Actually, nice. Thank you.
Isn't she delightful?
She sure is.
No.
Right. Well, it sounds like the whole realm of abuse of elders is very dynamic. Things are changing. The bad people come up with new techniques all the time.
We got a phone call the other day, the grandson scheme. Hi, this is your grandson. What do you have? He had a foreign accent. He probably sounded, what? You know.
Right.
Yeah.
I said, you got to be kidding.
You got to be kidding.
Yep. Yeah.
And unfortunately, some of the elderly people may not be aware of certain things.
So they don't know they're being scammed.
They don't know they're being scammed. They might be gullible. They might think it's
isn't
legitimate.
that horrible about
So,
Mickey Rooney?
There's a lot of things that can be done,
But
I
a lot of
suppose, to
them.
attack the problem, but everybody has to be conscientious about it.
Right.
It's great that you're aware of these things and in a way, you're advocating for them one way or the other.
Right.
And it makes people aware through our show. We make people aware of it's another form of a scam, and that list is growing and growing and growing.
Absolutely.
So
And,
you got to wind up.
Sure. So we want to thank you for being here.
She's the wind-up person.
I'm all wound up.
I'm the greeter.
It was great to have
You
you
too,
here,
lovely.
Tracy, and shed some light on a topic that is very important to everybody. And we hope that your efforts will continue to educate people, and we're here to help out if there's anything we can do
Great.
to help you.
Yeah, and spread
Thank
the
you
word
for
about
having
our
me.
police officers are our friends activity coloring
Absolutely.
book. Yeah.
Yes. So
Okay.
I want to thank our viewers for watching, and if you have any questions about this topic of elder abuse, please get in touch with us, and we'll be happy to share your information with Tracy. And we hope that you continue to share your ideas and questions and any topics that you'd like to have us cover in the future, because that's where we get our ideas from. Because remember, this is your show, the law, your money,
And you.